نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We have been covering a topic dedicated to the month of Ramadan, our interactions with the Quran. Last week we talked about the manuscript, the Quran that we find throughout the masjid on the shelves in our homes, the fonts, the background to that. Inshallah, today we'll cover another interaction that we have with the Quran. And many a times it goes unnoticed until we have to look up the meanings of the Quran. So our interaction with the Quran regarding translations. The translations of the Quran are various. Translation of the Quran would be a separate category from the tafasir, the detailed, in-depth explanation of the Quran. So you have a translation versus tafsir. We have to acknowledge the difference between the two. A translation is something very simplistic in its approach, just translating word for word here. We have Imam Muhaj, mashallah, he has a very beautiful one in the Urdu language. If you open it up, anyone who can appreciate the Urdu language, you can find word for word translation. And mashallah, it's very resourceful. It's very easy to go through. If anyone wants to appreciate a word for word translation of the Quran in the Urdu language. And those of us who are committed and rely on the English language, we just want to go very quickly in our own experiences. Right now, if we ever wanted to recommend a translation of the Quran, and you cannot say Tawheed Center's in-house translation, Imtiaz Saab's Quran, Easy Quran. If we ever were to recommend a translation of the Quran to anyone, or even to benefit our own selves, our own family members, which one would we recommend? And why? So this is a question that all of us should have already had an answer to. The available translations on the market right now, we can go back to classical works. We can go back to modern works of this effort of translating the Quran. After all, it's a very daunting task to attempt to translate the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After all, we are mere human beings who are attempting this. We can never acknowledge that a translation work or even a tafsir work is final or free from critique. Every single translation, every single tafsir on the market right now, it's open to critique because it's man-made. It's a man-made effort. Human beings have committed and dedicated time and effort. So, but at the end of the day, we don't want to discount these efforts, but we certainly have to acknowledge the fact that whenever there is an effort to translate the Quran, then the author's biases tend to get into the translation of the Quran. Biases, opinions. That's why you have footnotes on every single translation of the Quran, every single tafsir, you will find footnotes. Footnotes mentioning the next level of explanation of what the author is trying to get across. And if we do a simple search online, and all of us, we are very expert on searching things up online, we will see that just type in translation of the Quran, and you'll probably get a Wikipedia page, and it will tell you the different numbers. And there are a huge number of translations of the Quran available on the market. Today you will find from many, many perspectives. You will find the Sunni tradition, you will find the Shia tradition, you will find Sufi, you will find Mu'tazili, you will find modern approach, you will find classical approach. And even in the classical works, the authors, they mention that there are also Israeliyat. Israeliyats are Israeli opinions and explanations that have crept into the works. And some of the most famous Israeliyats pertain to Nabi Musa alayhi salam stories, Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, Nabi Dawood alayhi salam, Nabi Harun, Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. The story regarding that, how the Imra'at Aziz tried to tempt Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. The amount of Israeliyat that are found, it's mind-boggling. Some of the classical works of Tafsir Baydawi, you have Tafsir Jalalain. Modern works include very famous scholars such as Sheikh Sha'rawi. You have Sayyid Qutb of Egypt. He wrote Fi Dhilal al-Quran. There are right here on this shelf right here, very well-known work in Urdu, Ma'arif al-Quran, Mufti Shafi Sahib rahmatullah alayh. So all of these approaches of translations of the Quran and tafasir of the Quran, it takes care of certain markets, certain demographics. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a one-size-fits-all because there are certain topics in the Quran. For example, the topic of Rajam. The topic of Rajam, if they ever wanted to bring this topic into, for example, a university setting, they will not take classical approaches to that subject. The university deans, the university presidents, the professors, they will immediately throw out any classical explanation of these subjects. These are hot-button subjects, and they want to fit it into a Western audience, their student body. So there has been a modern day attempts at translating the Quran. There have been modern day works where non-Muslims, and we all know this, non-Muslims are professors of Islamic studies throughout universities in America, and they attempt to explain Islam, they attempt to explain the Quran, and of course they are bringing their own opinions into the explanation. But today we'll look at the translation of the Quran and the tafsir of the Quran from a prisoner's perspective. A prisoner, and we all know, if any of us have ever visited a prison, mashallah, you will know that the prison demographic is a very unique demographic because what happens in the prisons, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from ever having to be admitted as a prisoner, an inmate. But it's a very unique environment. There are groups that form. If you do not associate yourself immediately to a group inside the prison walls, then you're a very easy prey. You will be considered vulnerable. You're weak. You have no defense mechanism inside the prisons. And all of us on the outside walls of a prison, we come to find out that the growing number of Muslim converts, reverts is tremendously increasing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding these people in an environment that we could not even fathom, let alone we don't want to experience that ever. But people, brothers and sisters, are accepting the faith, and everyone who has ever visited a prison, they will mention that you have certain groups and they are very, isolated groups. Either you have a 100% white group or you have a 100% black group, Mexicans, whatever you want to call the demographic. But then when you look at the Muslim group, it's very diverse. Blacks, whites, Mexicans, you name it, all different demographics, backgrounds, cultures, languages. And they are a very strong group, the Muslims inside the prison. And one thing that they all look forward to is anyone who visits them, especially any Muslim, they say that, please, can you share with us a translation of the Quran. We are dying in here. We want to learn more about Islam, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed. Now, again, it goes back to our own personal homework. If we have done the homework, what translation would we recommend to our brothers and sisters, inmates in the prison system? There have been efforts, I believe. There is a translation, all of us might know it, Abdullah Ali Yusuf. It goes back to 1930s America. 1930s, this is a very well-known translation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the brother for his efforts. It went all the way from 1930s until 1990s. It sort of fit the bill. This translation accommodated anyone and everyone who was ever interested in an English translation. But of course, it had its own sets of challenges. And we know the books, any English book that is printed, authored, published, they go through various editions. The first edition, the second edition will have corrections. So that version went through a very small amount of revisions. And then you have another translation known as Pickett Hall. Pickett Hall, Marmaduke Pickett Hall. His translation, it faced a set of challenges that the reader was not able to find the English in that version easy to read. It was almost Victorian era, old British language era translation attempt. But whatever the case, that sort of suited the needs of that era and that generation. If today, 2024, any of us or any of our children or grandchildren ever want that, they would find Abdullah Ali Yusuf's translation or Pickett Hall's translation very difficult to read. The English alone will be a turnoff. They will say, I can't understand this. So, mashallah, Imtiaz Saab, he has put a great effort on this easy Quran. But the easy Quran also, I really wanted to know if there is anyone who read the easy Quran cover to cover. Mashallah. When you read something cover to cover, you will be able to appreciate it. Not only appreciate it, if there is something that might have stand out, a translation that you might need further clarification either from the author himself, he's still amongst us, you can still ask him, or maybe you need a scholar to further explain. Again, we mentioned that the authors, they tend to give their own opinion and their own biases into the translation. For example, the Darus Salam version or Sahih International version, they will probably translate certain subjects. For example, Istawa ala al-Arsh. We all know this. Very hot topic. It's always discussed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala خلق السماوات والأرض في ستة أيام ثم استوى على العرش. Very famous topic. The translator will say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything, and after that 6 days Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the arsh, and that's it. End of discussion. So what about the verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that huwa ma'akum aynama kuntum? So these differentiating verses, how do you sort of unite them and explain it to the general broader audience? So again, going back to the translation, the tafsir of the Quran, it is after all the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We never want to be able to say that our translation or this translation is end all, the final version, no other version is needed after this. How can you say that? It's human-made translations. So what we're trying to get at here is that if we were to appreciate it from a perspective of a prisoner, we will be able to appreciate every single work that is in existence and certainly give some attention to this for future endeavors as well. When we look at it from a prisoner's perspective, what they mention is that inside the prison walls, all of these sectarian differences, it doesn't matter. The sectarian differences that we mentioned, for example, Sunni, Shia, Hanafi, Shafi'i, Hanbali, Maturidi, Ash'ari, Deobandi, Barelwi, these things don't matter inside of a prison wall. Sectarian divisions that the Muslim masses are grappling with on a global level, inside a prison wall, they are very laser focused. Meaning, if you're a Muslim inside the prison wall, you're a Muslim, end of story. It's not what are you? You're a Sunni, you're a Shia, you're a Hanafi, you're a Shafi'i, you're a Deobandi, you're a Barelwi, Maturidi, Ash'ari. It doesn't matter inside of a prison wall. So that's why when a prisoner asks you, I want a translation of the Quran, you're not going to ask him, what are you? Are you a Sunni or a Shia? They're like, what are you talking about? That doesn't matter to me. I just want a translation of the Quran. Give me the translation so I can appreciate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to me. So this is number one, is that from a prisoner's perspective, and maybe those of us who are on the outside walls of a prison, we can appreciate that perspective, that subhanallah, how we have divided and how it will continue to be divided. The prophecy of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that it will be divided, the ummah will be divided. And we certainly make dua that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst that one group that is considered on the right path, on Sirat al-Mustaqim. It's inevitable, right? The divisions are inevitable. So that's number one, is that these sectarian differences, it doesn't matter to a prisoner, and we can definitely look at that and appreciate that. The second thing they mention is that you can never discount being under the guide of a qualified teacher to explain Islam to you. You can never discount that. And maybe in our current era and generation, internet has really spoiled the masses where, you know what, I'll just go to Mufti Google or Sheikh Google and I'll just Google it and I'll find my answer, end of day, end of discussion. Inmates on the inside walls, they always mention this, that you know what, we are yearning and we tremendously need a qualified Islamic teacher that can explain the nuances that are available, especially when it pertains to the subject of the Quran, the translation, the tafsir of the Quran, a qualified teacher. And there is an effort by an individual, Sheikh Rami Nasur. He has created a foundation, Tayyiba Foundation. MashaAllah, he's doing great work. He has not only dedicated his efforts towards prisoners, but he has also begun to educate them, and he has also begun to give them ijazat, certain certifications after they complete a Islamic course. Sheikh Rami is doing a tremendous effort in this, and he has dedicated himself to that. And I believe if the prison system they allow, they probably contact him and get all the books that have been published through his foundation, and they are able to be made available to the prisoners. And the third thing that a prisoner mentions from the inside walls of a prison, Muslim brothers and sisters inside the prison, they mention that stick with community, ilzamil jama'a. Stick with community. Sticking with community can never be discounted. All of us sitting here, alhamdulillah, we belong to a community, either directly through Tawheed Center, or at least we have friends, family, colleagues, neighbors, co-workers. We are part of a broader community. So if someone, for example, is missing, someone is ill, some family needs assistance or help, they have fallen on tough times, a community will always sort of check up on someone and say, you know what, I haven't seen XYZ individual in many, many days. I haven't seen them in the entire month of Ramadan. Someone from the community will notice this, and they will reach out, they will inquire the well-being. And this is a beautiful thing, to be part of a community. So, I mean, we can go on and on, but what we can Some of us might say, you know what, the Imam is mentioning about prisoners and inmates and cellmates, and what's the connection? But if we ever look at the verses of the Quran, if we ever appreciate the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we will appreciate the perspective of a prisoner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there are groups of people who tend to miskin, yatim, and asir. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. Miskin, yatim, orphans, and prisoners. And in this verse specifically, prisoners of war. That there are a group of people that they feed and accommodate them, because this is a vulnerable demographic after all. If we ever looked at America's system, and there is a project known as the Innocent Project, there are people who are locked up right now for crimes that they have not even perpetrated. They are innocent. What about the prisoners in Israeli prisons, our brothers and sisters of Palestine? We definitely know that 99% of those prisoners are innocent. What about the hadith that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam reminds us that ad-dunya sijnul mu'min, that this world is like a prison for the believer. How would we ever appreciate that hadith if we don't look at life, or if we don't compare this worldly life and the akhirah from the perspective and the lens of a prisoner? So in conclusion, whatever we have mentioned today, it all ties back to our interaction with the Quran. And if we were unable to answer the beginning question, that if someone were to reach out to us and ask us that, you're a Muslim, can you please recommend to me a translation of the Quran? And if we do recommend something, that means we already have done the homework. We have already read that specific translation cover to cover. After all, if we read something from cover to cover, then only we can recommend it, right? Or are we simply blindly recommending things? MashaAllah, I will share this personal experience that when Imtiaz Sahib, he sent, MashaAllah, truckloads of Easy Quran to Tawheed Center, and it arrived here. We needed volunteers just to unload, and the boxes were full. And then, MashaAllah, we started distributing it across America. Immediately within a few days of receiving those, I started getting calls and emails, and they're saying that, why are you guys sharing? Immediate doubt. The questions that I received were doubt. That why are you guys sending these free boxes of the Quran? Are you guys trying to spread some message? This was the immediate, that why are you guys giving us free Qurans? Are you guys trying to spread a certain message or a certain content? What are you guys trying to do? So it was not received or welcomed immediately. It was people were in doubt. And then after explanation that who are we? We're a masjid in southeastern Michigan, our founder, and we started giving the details. Then and only then the eagerness or the doubt subsided, it went down. So immediately the doubt came up, which mentions, and we can all appreciate that doubt pertaining to a translation of the Quran, which means that they must have experienced certain opinions and messages that were found in the translation of the Quran that were either off topic, or it was the opinions of the author and it was giving the wrong message. So they might have had to pull it from their shelves so that their audience and their congregants and their musallis could be protected. So this is the field that we are currently facing today. And the work will continue. Either we are part of that equation into the future, and our children and our future generations are part of imparting authentic knowledge to the masses into the future, or we are removed from that effort. We can only continue making dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be part of that equation, imparting Islam in this part of the world, which so desperately needs Islam and what Islam has to offer. So in conclusion, we make dua that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to impart correct knowledge of deen, and any mistakes, any errors that are found are from me and from the slip that shaitan has allowed for me to slip of the tongue. Anything that was said that this is always in conclusion of the translation of a Quran or the tafsir, it always mentions this. The author will always put this, that anything that is found in this work that is beneficial, correct, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the tawfiq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the author. And any error is from my human side. Human is full of errors and it is from shaitan. So in conclusion, let us continue looking into this and let us not be lazy in the sense that, you know what, we are blindly recommending things, but rather we certainly hope that we have done our homework. We certainly hope that we have done our homework for our own benefit, for our family's benefit, and the benefit of people that we can make these recommendations to into the future. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.